What if the deep fatigue you can't shake isn't a sign you're failing, but the first signal that a more authentic version of you is finally ready to be born? You recognize this state. A peculiar hollowness. That playlist you once adored now feels like background noise from another room. A text arrives, inviting you to a gathering that once sparked excitement, and all you feel is a quiet, internal sigh. The ambitions you once chased with fire now look at you from your journal like notes in a forgotten language. You go through the motions of your days, but it's as if a thin, transparent film separates you from the vividness of life. Everything is muted, distant, and the most unsettling part? There was no catastrophe, no single event you can blame. The lights didn't go out, they just dimmed, slowly, over many seasons. The fear this breeds isn't about sadness. It's the terrifying whisper. Is this it? Is this just what being alive feels like now? What if I told you this isn't a malfunction, but a profound and necessary initiation? That this flatness is not a sign you're broken, but evidence you're evolving? Stay with me. What we explore in this space will entirely reshape how you see this chapter. This isn't your life unraveling. It is in fact preparing you to be woven together more wholly than ever before. First, the unseen passage. The unseen passage. There is a movement within the psyche that makes no announcement. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or crisis. It unfolds in the deep quiet, like the gradual, almost invisible weathering of a mask you've worn so long, you mistook it for your own face. And then, one ordinary morning, you notice a faint crack. You realize what's becoming permeable isn't your spirit, it's the armor, the identity you carefully assembled to meet the world's demands. In the framework of depth psychology, this constructed self is necessary. It's the persona you wear at the office, within your family, in the theater of society. It isn't a lie. We all need a functional self to navigate the shared world. But the crisis emerges when that functional self petrifies into a cage, when the costume fuses to your skin, and you forget it was ever something you could remove. The moment your former joys lose their flavor, the instant the milestones you pursued feel like artifacts from another's journey, that is often the soul's first quiet alert that the armor is fracturing. This passage doesn't declare itself with sirens. It murmurs through a gradual dimming. The career ladder that once promised meaning now feels like a series of empty gestures. The social scripts you once recited to feel belonging suddenly sound hollow, like lines from a play whose plot you no longer understand. You can still perform your part, perhaps even masterfully, but the resonance is gone. You're an understudy for a role you no longer wish to play. Psychologically, this is what occurs when your life force, your essential vitality, begins to retract from engagements powered solely by inertia and the hunger for outside approval. When the armor is worn too long, it consumes a staggering amount of your inner resources to uphold the performance. I'm capable. I'm engaged. I'm fulfilled. But that well is not infinite. In time, your deeper system reclaims that energy. Just as the body will pull warmth inward to protect its vital organs in the cold, your psyche redirects vitality away from the inauthentic to safeguard what is real. You experience this as a loss of motivation, but in reality, your energy is being rerouted. It is ceasing to finance a facade to start funding the truth of you. The erosion of this outer layer often begins with a profound sense of disorientation, while you are, on paper, doing everything correctly. Not because you've made a mistake, but because your entire being is now declining to participate in a story that has reached its expiration date. It is the internal equivalent of a trusted advisor resigning, not in protest, but from a quiet, irrevocable knowing that they can no longer serve an agenda that isn't aligned. Many misinterpret this phase as a personal failure. In truth, it is an act of profound courage. Your system is refusing to invest in what is no longer congruent. Consider a common archetype. Perhaps you've been the achiever, the one who delivers, who exceeds, who defines themselves by the next victory. That became a piece of your armor. And then, the fissure appears. You find you can no longer muster the expected hunger for the next target. The accolades feel weightless. This confuses you, because you believed that striving was your core. This silent shift also casts light on the tension between the persona you project and the shadow you've sequestered. What frustrates you intensely in others often points directly to the disowned qualities within yourself that the armor has kept suppressed. As the armor cracks, the shadow stirs. You may find yourself more impatient, more sensitive to noise, more acutely attuned to artifice in the world around you. This is not you decaying. It is you becoming more aware of the banished landscapes of your own soul. A person who was perpetually outgoing, now craving solitude, isn't losing their light. Their social armor is simply dissolving, permitting the genuine presence beneath to finally know fresh air. Sometimes the armor's thinning is even more subtle. It doesn't bring sorrow. It brings a deep, all-encompassing neutrality. It's like walking through a gallery of impressive paintings and having the sudden, sobering realization that none of them move you. Every frame, every image, was chosen to impress a critic who lives only in your mind, a version of you built for an audience. And in that moment, you feel like a spectator in your own existence. The most isolating part of this stage is the sheer impossibility of explaining it. How do you tell people you feel estranged from the person they recognize, when you yourself are no longer sure who that is? This dissolution creates no external evidence, no visible wreckage for others to point to and mend. The emptiness grows inside you, a private chamber growing still, and you must sit within it, uncertain of the exit. From a depth perspective, this is a sacred, if daunting, frontier. It is the psyche initiating a recall, and only by abiding in this emptiness can you start to comprehend. The cracking is not meant to dismantle you. It is creating an aperture. Second, the essential unmaking. The essential unmaking. There is a point on the inner journey that is almost universally misread, and therefore feared. It is when your internal world falls silent. Drive dissipates. Your willpower feels like an engine that won't turn over. Even the hobbies that once delivered a sense of flow now feel flat and vacant. Most people diagnose this as stagnation, depression, or burnout. But within the lens of transformational work, this is the commencement of a deep, alchemical sequence. The stage the ancient mystics referred to as the dark night of the soul, the blackening. The phase where all that is outworn, all that is no longer viable, must decompose so a new consciousness can be forged. The dark night is not primarily about sadness. It feels more like wandering through the meticulously arranged rooms of your own mind and realizing you are a guest who has overstayed. You don't hate the furnishings. You simply feel no connection to them. It is the quiet of a once dominant internal software powering down, making room for a new, more sophisticated program to install. You feel like an observer to your own life, watching your breath fog a cold window, certain of your aliveness but utterly unclear on its purpose. That uncertainty is paralyzing because it mimics the death of purpose itself. In alchemy, the blackening is the indispensable first step in transmuting lead into gold, and it always begins with dissolution. Material must darken, break apart, surrender its known shape. So too, your psyche must enter this darkened terrain, so that the old within you, outdated narratives, expired goals, outmoded ways of belonging, can compost into nothing. Nothing retains its former luster. Some describe it as watching my own life through thick glass. But the perspective we must courageously adopt is this: we cannot transmute what we do not first allow to end. If the armor is cracking, then the dark night is the moment the entire stage beneath it vanishes. You start interrogating foundations you assumed were bedrock. Why this life path? Why these relational habits? Why did I accept that as my calling? The greatest shock isn't the absence of answers. It's the dawning awareness that you operated for so long, without ever sincerely posing the questions. It's common for individuals, immediately after securing a long-pursued goal, to fall into a void deeper than any struggle they faced on the ascent. They can't fathom why satisfaction evaporates upon arrival. From a transformational view, that is the dark night commencing its work. The old storyline has concluded. It has nothing more to offer you, and the resulting emptiness is the cleared ground prepared for a higher order of being to take root. The dark night is also akin to the hidden intelligence of the natural world. Before a field erupts in wildflowers, the old growth must wither. The energy retreats to the roots. The system draws inward to conserve and reorganize. The human spirit operates on the same principle. You contract not because you are deficient, but because your inner world is undergoing a restructuring at a depth your thinking mind cannot fathom. This is why even simple tasks can feel monumental. Your vitality is being drawn from the surface, from the performance of living, down into the substratum, where the real architecture is being redesigned. What makes the dark night so arduous is its silence. You never realize you've crossed the threshold into the unknown. You only find yourself adrift in a troubling flatness. And because our modern conditioning equates being alive with constant motion, output, and external recognition, when those external signals fade, we mistake it for the end of our vitality. But in the alchemical truth, the inverse is occurring. When matter blackens, when it loses its form, it is preparing to be reconstituted in a more essential state. If, as you listen, you sense a darkened corner of your own experience being gently illuminated, feel free to leave a small mark in the comments below, a quiet signal to yourself that says, I recognize this terrain. Sometimes a single, silent acknowledgement is enough to make the path feel less solitary. There is nothing defective about feeling detached from it all. The dark night is not kind, but it is necessary. The death of the old is rarely graceful. It arrives shrouded in ambiguity, confusion, and a formless dread. Yet those who have navigated through this obscurity all report the same crucial insight. The emptiness itself is the very chamber where the most genuine kind of life begins its slow, inevitable return. Third, the energy that was never yours. The energy that was never yours. And as the old dissolves in the darkness of the dark night, you believe you are simply tumbling into an abyss. But that void is the first clean space where something authentic can finally take shape. Here is the pivotal realization. You have been functioning on a fuel source that was never your own. This seeming collapse is not a sign of fragility. It is the moment your unconscious mind stops bankrolling a life it never truly endorsed. Depth psychology proposes we are all influenced by a vast, shared psychic field, the collective unconscious. It holds ancient blueprints, social templates, and behavioral patterns far older than our individual lives. What's startling is how invisibly they steer us. They mold desires you feel are uniquely yours, when often they are inherited legacies of cultural and familial expectation. So, when you feel disconnected from your own life, it isn't necessarily that you've lost your flame. It may be that you were never truly living from your own flame to begin with. You are exhausted from trying to sustain a cadence your soul was never composed to dance to. The collective unconscious operates like a powerful tide. You can't see its force, but you swim with its current because it seems like the only direction. It persuades you that contentment lies in a particular status, that worth is found in specific accolades, that fulfillment comes from acquiring symbols that command respect. But in those stark, silent moments when you stand amidst the trophies of that success and feel absolutely nothing, a deeper part of you murmurs, "This nourishment is not for me." Contemporary psychology might frame this as a profound misalignment of values. Externally, you are living according to collective templates. Internally, you possess a unique psychic fingerprint, a soul frequency that belongs solely to you. When these two are in chronic dissonance, both body and mind grow weary, not from inadequacy, but because no organism can thrive indefinitely on a fuel that is incompatible with its intrinsic design. Imagine trying to thrive in a climate your biology wasn't built for, simply because everyone else seems to be flourishing there. You ignore your body's signals, only the example of the crowd. For a while you might adapt, powered by the need to belong, but eventually your system rebels. Your energy plummets. You cannot continue. That distress isn't failure. It is your biology declaring, this environment is not for us. The soul operates with the same unerring fidelity. It has its own native rhythm, its own source of sustenance. And when you compel it to conform to expectations foreign to its essence, the unconscious does what any intelligent system will do. It initiates a protective shutdown. It ceases to allocate precious energy to pursuits that lead you away from your core. The profound irony is that most people never realize they've been running on borrowed fuel. So when the unconscious withdraws its support, they diagnose it as a depressive episode, a decline in passion, a loss of self. But from this vantage point, we perceive something else entirely. This is the moment the soul prepares to guide you back to your authentic axis. You aren't losing anything of true value. You are shedding what was never genuinely yours. From a neurobiological lens, when we live for external validation, our brain's reward pathways operate on an approval-based cycle. Each like, each compliment, each recognition delivers a dopamine spike, weaving a potent illusion of being on the right track. But dopamine fueled by social approval is addictive and notoriously fleeting. When the deeper psyche recognizes this cycle does not nourish your essence, it disrupts the circuit. This is why everything that once thrilled you can abruptly feel hollow. The most painful, and ultimately liberating, truth is this: many of the dreams you pursued with fervor were not your own. They were echoes. You were passionately constructing a life your inner world never consented to inhabit. And when the unconscious moved to preserve you by cutting the energy supply, you misinterpreted it as the destruction of your life. In reality, it was the prelude to constructing a real one. Through this lens, the moment you recognize you've been running on borrowed fuel is your first genuine moment of sovereignty. You begin to step out of the gravitational pull of the collective tide. And for the first time, in the quiet, you might hear the faint but distinct pulse of your own rhythm. That is where the authentic journey begins. Fourth, when the unconscious begins to signal. When the unconscious begins to signal. From this juncture forward, your inner life no longer vibrates on its old frequency. A dissonance emerges, and that very dissonance cracks open the door to what Jung termed synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences that defy pure logic, yet carry undeniable personal resonance. Synchronicity isn't ordinary chance, like thinking of an old friend who then calls. It is the unconscious sending encrypted messages when you have stepped off the old, mapped path, but your conscious awareness hasn't caught up yet. These are instants when the external world mirrors, with uncanny precision, the internal shifts you are navigating. As the old life structure dissolves, synchronicity acts as a subtle homing beacon from the depths, a reminder that even in disorientation, an intelligent order is still orchestrating beneath the surface. It's fascinating to observe that synchronicities often increase in frequency when you feel most untethered. When the borrowed fuel is exhausted and you're running on reserves, the unconscious begins broadcasting on a different wavelength. You're listening to one station, the station of your former life, while the unconscious transmits on another. This creates interference, and in that static, synchronicity breaks through like a clear transmission. Imagine you're moving mechanically through a life that has lost its meaning. You navigate your day like a ghost. Then, a phrase from a podcast you randomly select articulates the exact question haunting your quiet hours. Or a snippet of a stranger's conversation in a park seems to directly address the private dilemma you've shared with no one. You know it wasn't intended for you, yet it lands with targeted accuracy. From a depth perspective, synchronicity occurs when inner and outer realities achieve a fleeting moment of congruence. You didn't manifest it. You and the world simply intersected at the same point of meaning. The outer world becomes a reflective surface for the movements happening in the hidden chambers of your soul. But synchronicity doesn't always arrive as a comforting omen. Sometimes it arrives through the people you attract, particularly those who challenge, frustrate, or drain you. You might ask, why do I keep drawing the same type of difficult dynamic? You see it as a curse of bad luck. But through this lens, it's not a curse. It's a reflection, an external echo of internal turbulence you have not yet reconciled. When you operate on misaligned, borrowed energy, your psychic frequency becomes distorted. This distortion isn't visible. It's like a radio tuned slightly off station. The signal is there, but it's garbled and unclear. In such a state, you cannot receive clean transmissions. And in such a state, you will magnetize others who are broadcasting on similarly distorted frequencies, individuals operating from anxiety, scarcity, or their own profound disconnection. As the saying goes, what is not made conscious will appear in your life as fate. If you repeatedly find yourself in dynamics that feel draining, disrespectful, or cold, it may not be about the world being hostile. It may indicate an unconscious frequency within you, perhaps of porous boundaries, a hidden longing for validation, or an unprocessed wound. Unhealed parts recognize each other long before conscious minds do. Take a slow breath. Consider this. Could past relational patterns have been mirrors of unexplored territories within yourself? And if so, what fragment of your inner landscape have you just glimpsed in that reflection? Synchronicity doesn't only guide you toward light, it often leads you directly to the necessary shadows, so you can finally see the source of the dimness within. Sometimes the most potent synchronicity is realizing the person you hoped would be your sanctuary was in fact placed on your path to reveal the ship you've been unwilling to abandon within yourself. Synchronicity also communicates in symbols. You might notice a specific motif recurring, a particular creature, a natural phenomenon, a number, appearing in dreams, media, and daily life over a condensed period. These images tap into the archetypal layers of the collective unconscious. When the unconscious needs to convey something that linear language cannot capture, it employs symbolism. Symbols bypass rational analysis, so you feel as if the universe is nodding in your direction. But in this framework, it is your own depths, after a long silence, reopening a long-closed dialogue. Synchronicity is evidence of your migration from a persona-driven existence to a soul-centric existence. And this uprising from the depths is not an attack on your life. It is the uprising of the most authentic part of you, the part that never agreed to the terms of a borrowed life, even when you buried it under obligations, achievements, and constant noise. When this core self stirs, every coincidence can become a clue. Every repetition can become a map fragment for the uncharted path ahead. Fifth, the weight that is not illness. The weight that is not illness. And just as synchronicities begin to flicker through the fog, a heavier, more pervasive layer can descend. You don't just feel disinterested. You feel as if you are moving through a dense, invisible liquid. Every simple action requiring Herculean effort. Your focus fragments. Joy feels like a theoretical concept you can't access. The basic sensation of being alive becomes muffled, and the fear rises, cold and clinical. Is this clinical depression? But from the perspective of deep transformation, what you are experiencing may not be pathology. It is often the contraction of consciousness, a natural, protective response of the psyche when the old internal architecture has dissolved. and the new one is not yet constructed. This is a strategic withdrawal to the core. Consciousness retreats into the fertile dark to reorganize itself, much like a forest retreats to its roots in winter. Imagine you've driven the same route for a decade. You're on autopilot. No thought required. Then one day, the road disappears. You are forced onto an uncharted path, in deep fog with no landmarks. The disorientation you feel isn't a failure to navigate. It's the absence of a known map. Your internal guidance system, which ran on predictable routines and external cues, has gone silent. The mind is floating in a sea of unfamiliarity. Subjectively, this sea feels identical to depression. But it is not a collapse of function. It is a recalibration of being. In psychological terms, this is an emotional threshold reset. As you change from within, the volume controls on your emotions are being meticulously adjusted. What once stimulated you no longer reaches the trigger point. What once brought pleasure doesn't register, not because you've lost the capacity for pleasure, but because your system is recalibrating to respond only to stimuli that are truly resonant for the emerging you. You haven't lost your feelings. You are resetting their baseline sensitivity. Here's a sensory analogy. If you live beside a busy highway for years, your hearing adjusts. The constant roar becomes your normal. But if you then move to a remote cabin in the woods, the silence is initially overwhelming. You might think, the world has gone quiet. But it hasn't. You're in a new auditory landscape, and your system needs time to recalibrate to hear the subtler sounds, the wind in the pines, the creek's murmur, your own thoughts. Consciousness behaves similarly during transformation. When the outer world stops being loud in the ways you're accustomed to, you may feel numb. But that numbness is often the necessary recalibration period, so you can begin to perceive the quieter, more authentic signals emanating from within. This wait-like state also stems from the soul's profound energy conservation protocol. When the unconscious perceives that you have been hemorrhaging vitality on inauthentic pursuits, it initiates a power-saving mode, like a smartphone dimming its screen to preserve the last of its battery. Your mind begins to close unnecessary background apps, mute draining external stimuli, and dampen emotional responses to prevent a total system shutdown. This conservation creates the sensation of inner emptiness. But in truth, it is a brilliant defense against a far more catastrophic spiritual bankruptcy. Look deeper, with gentle curiosity. Clinical depression often corrodes hope, leaving a flat, inert terrain. But in this transformational wait, if you listen with exquisite patience, you may still detect faint tremors of movement beneath the surface, a spark of genuine curiosity about a new idea, a sudden, clean no arising from a place of deep knowing, a question you've never before allowed yourself to voice. These are not the hallmarks of pathology. They are the first, fragile stirrings of a new life assembling itself. The crucial distinction is this: you are in the anteroom of authentic growth. It is the phase where the conscious mind must surrender its illusion of control, so a new, more authentic structure can self-organize from the blueprint of your soul. What makes it so profoundly frightening is the utter lack of visibility. You can't see where you're being led. You only know, with a certainty that aches, that you are leaving the old country behind for good. But remember, all genuine psychological maturation requires an increased capacity to tolerate ambiguity, uncertainty, and the creative anxiety of the unknown. Thank you for walking with me this far. If any of these reflections have resonated, have named a fragment of your own journey, I invite you to stay until the very end. The path ahead opens into even more integrative layers of understanding. And if you wish to continue exploring this inner terrain together, consider subscribing. It's a simple, quiet way to ensure we don't lose each other on this journey back to your core. Sixth, the gentle indicators of change. The gentle indicators of change. And just when you're uncertain if you're sinking or floating, Small, quiet signals begin to surface. So subtle you could dismiss them, yet so significant that once noticed, they confirm, this is not a collapse. This is a metamorphosis. And true metamorphosis rarely arrives with trumpets. It arrives on the breath of a whisper. The first, most telling sign is that your reactions undergo a fundamental shift. Where you were once easily triggered by criticism, gossip, or perceived slights, you now find you simply lack the bandwidth for the drama. You lose interest in the minor battles you once felt compelled to win. This newfound quiet, though it may initially feel like apathy, is an early indicator of inner maturation and consolidation. Another signal emerges in your diminishing need to explain or defend yourself. Previously, if someone misunderstood your motives or actions, you felt a compelling urgency to correct the record, to manage their perception of you. Now, you notice that compulsion has largely dissolved. You no longer feel the magnetic pull to justify, to convince, or to broker peace by betraying your own inner truth. This silence isn't surrender. It's the quiet signature of someone stepping out of a life performed for an audience and into a life authored from an internal source. Then, you may observe a gradual loosening of your grip on specific outcomes. The metrics you once micromanaged, career milestones, others' opinions, social validation, begin to lose their tyrannical weight. You're less anxious when plans change unexpectedly. You don't spiral over a delayed or unanswered message. You cease interpreting detours and delays as personal failures. This is a clear signal your consciousness is shifting from a mode of frantic doing to a mode of observant, grounded being. Another profound sign is a growing, non-negotiable need for genuine solitude. You crave space not to escape from the world, but to attune to yourself. Interestingly, silence used to feel like an uncomfortable void to fill. Now it feels like a sanctuary to enter. Stillness is no longer a threat of boredom. It's becoming a home for clarity. As the psychologist might reframe, loneliness isn't merely about being alone. It's about being unable to communicate what feels most vital within you. Your desire for solitude isn't antisocial. It is the most crucial social connection you can make at this time. The reconnection with the self you are becoming. As you shift, your relational tolerance undergoes a quiet revolution. You no longer possess the stamina for connections that once drained you, connections you once sustained out of obligation or habit. You see the dynamic you once rationalized with sudden, piercing clarity. The ancient compulsion to play savior or fixer fades. You begin to recognize a difficult but liberating truth. Not every bond is designed for the duration of your lifetime. Not every person has a permanent role in the story you are now writing. Choosing to walk away, or to let a connection fade, becomes an act of profound self-preservation and integrity, not an act of cruelty. Another subtle yet vital sign. Your perception of time itself seems to alter, to decelerate. Your pace is no longer dictated by the inner shouts of hurry, achieve, or get it done. You move with more deliberation. You respond after a moment of consideration, not from knee-jerk reflex. This isn't laziness or lack of ambition. It's you consciously stepping out of the forced, frantic rhythm of your former life and learning, muscle by muscle, to move at your soul's natural, unhurried cadence. And finally, you may sense the first, fragile filaments of an unfamiliar internal peace, like a single beam of morning light piercing a long darkened room. One morning, you wake, and the weight feels a fraction lighter, not because anything has changed externally, but because something has shifted internally. One afternoon, you observe the way light filters through leaves and feel a softening in your chest. Just for a moment, you laugh, a genuine, unforced laugh, and realize it's been a long time since that sound came from that particular place within you. These micro moments are the first conscious breaths of a soul that has been holding its breath for years, waiting for permission to exhale. But perhaps the most significant, definitive signal of all is this. You have no authentic desire to go back. You may not yet see the destination with any clarity, but you are absolutely intuitively certain that you do not want and cannot return to the psychological country you left behind. That feeling, that quiet certainty, is the hallmark of what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming an undivided, authentic self. These signals are quiet, but they are profoundly trustworthy. They are your internal compass, the faint but steady stars guiding you through the long night of transition. And once you learn to recognize them, to trust them, you'll understand with a deep knowing, you are not falling apart. You are being quietly, patiently, and meticulously reassembled from the inside out. Seventh, the quiet reintegration. The quiet reintegration. When the gentle indicators of change begin to glow like embers in the pre-dawn dark, you'll grasp the central anchoring truth. You are no longer in the phase of unmaking. You are entering the phase of remaking. A quiet reintegration is now underway within you. Not a loud, dramatic rebirth announced to the world, but a deep, cellular realignment known first only to you. This is the very heart of individuation. The journey not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Individuation isn't about becoming a superior or flawless person. It is a homecoming, a retrieval mission for the scattered fragments of your essence that you abandoned, piece by piece, over the years while chasing a life script authored by forces outside yourself. It is like discovering a series of sealed rooms in your own psychic house. Rooms where you stored all the parts of yourself that didn't fit the old armor, the old performance. And now, with great care, you are bringing them, one by one, back into the light of your conscious awareness. Reintegration begins with a quiet, internal reorientation. You feel a pull to live differently, not to become more impressive to others, but to become more real to yourself. This is the critical distinction between a surface-level upgrade and a foundational tectonic transformation. In this sacred process, your conscious mind and your unconscious depths begin, for the first time, to collaborate instead of conflict. The internal civil war starts to cease fire. You begin to understand that you are not one at the expense of the other. You are the integration, the synthesis of both. And this reconciliation brings a profound, grounded serenity, a stability you've likely never before known. Reintegration is like a seed germinating in the dark, fertile earth. You don't witness the precise moment the shell cracks or the first radical hairs emerge, but one day, you look back over your shoulder and realize with quiet shock that you are not the person you were just a season ago. You are more grounded. A palpable stillness now resides within you, beneath the surface noise of life. You react less from conditioned patterns. And paradoxically, you perceive the world, its beauty, its complexity, its challenges, with more clarity and less personal turbulence. Not because the world has magically changed, but because you've finally stepped out of the dense fog of borrowed perception and into the clear air of your own seeing. Through this lens, this is the stage when the self, the central, archetypal core of your being, begins to speak with a quiet, unshakable authority from within. It opens within you a new and liberating possibility that you can live authentically, in alignment, without having to sacrifice your sanity or soul. It feels like discovering your inner house has many doors and windows, and you've spent your entire life only looking through one tightly curtained pane. Now you are beginning to open the shutters, and you see the full, breathtaking panorama of your own potential. Those who move through the process of individuation often describe their inner world as settling, like silt in a stirred-up river gradually sinking to the bottom, leaving the water clear. Not because life's challenges and storms vanish. They don't. But because you stop unconsciously stirring the sediment with old, frantic anxieties and reactive defenses. And when the water of your consciousness is clear, you can see all the way to the bottom. You see with startling clarity what you truly value, what you need to respectfully release, and what you must courageously embrace to stay true to your path. This is the moment when intuition ceases to be a mysterious, occasional flutter and becomes your most reliable daily guide. To consciously nurture this reintegration, there is a simple, potent practice. Each day, grant yourself 5 minutes of pure, non-judgmental inner inquiry. Ask one open-hearted question. What feels true for me in this exact moment? Some days the honest answer is I am weary and I need rest. Other days it might be I need spaciousness and quiet. Or a creative impulse is stirring within me. Sometimes, unexpectedly, the answer is a soft, solid knowing. I feel a quiet strength returning to my foundation. These 5 minutes act as a daily tether, a lifeline pulling your awareness and energy back from the world's relentless noise and into the sovereign quiet of your own center. Gradually, imperceptibly, you will feel the transformation consolidating, integrating, becoming your new ground of being. Another practice. When faced with a meaningful choice, don't first ask the mind, what should I do? Instead, pause, place a hand on your chest or abdomen, and ask the wisdom of your body. Which path feels like a subtle expansion in my being? Which feels like a contraction or a closing down? Your somatic intelligence, the ancient wisdom encoded in your flesh and nervous system, always knows the direction of alignment. Fear and old conditioning often speak in the noisy language of the mind. Soul truth often resonates in the quieter, felt sense of the body. When you learn to choose the option that brings even a slight sense of inner opening, of ease, of rightness, you are walking, step by conscious step, the sacred path of individuation. Reintegration is not the glittering moment you become your most dazzling, perfect, finished self. It is the humble, powerful moment you realize you are being reconstituted from the inside out, and that life no longer requires you to perform in order to earn your right to exist. It becomes a space where you can simply be, and from that place of being, see yourself and your world with unflinching, compassionate clarity. As we reach the conclusion of this shared exploration, you may arrive at a truth that seems deceptively simple, yet holds the power to reorient your entire inner universe. Conclusion. What you named as loss, as emptiness, as a frightening void, was, in fact, the necessary clearing. It is how your inner ecology, with profound intelligence, makes sacred space for what truly belongs. It is the essential process by which the soul prepares the ground, the fertile, dark, receptive ground, for new growth, for a life that is genuinely your own. And perhaps, for the first time after a long gray season of transition, you find you are no longer afraid of the quiet, because you have begun to understand that within that profound silence, someone essential has been waiting. The one you misplaced, piece by piece, amid the noise and the relentless need to please, to perform, to belong on terms that were not your own. So if you find yourself here, suspended in the in-between, knowing deeply that the old country is gone, but the new landscape is not yet fully visible, know this with quiet certainty. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are returning. And your life, in its infinite guiding wisdom, is slowly, patiently, and precisely opening a path, stone by stone, for you to walk, at last, back into the truth of yourself.